When you're working on a novel, it's important to truly know your main character throughout the entire story. You need to understand their background, personality traits, occupation, and motives. What drives them? What triggers them? Step into their shoes. If your character is part of an anti-terrorism unit, like in many of my books, you'll need to understand what that really means. Ask yourself, why did they join? Was it 9/11? Personal trauma? Patriotism? A thirst for justice or revenge? A strong character needs a strong motivation, and that takes research. If your story involves counterterrorism, you should explore topics like cyber attacks, law enforcement procedures, military tactics, business intelligence, and more. Before my disability, I worked as a computer programmer, so I already had a background in IT and logic. But that kind of knowledge is just the foundation. To truly bring your characters to life, you need to investigate, observe, and understand the world they live in. Luckily, we now have tools like the internet, the deep web, and even AI to help us. But when I wrote my early books, 29 so far, including Dutch and German translations, AI wasn't really around. I relied on news articles and deep research. Let me give you an example from my second novel in the Nightbird series, The Black Widow. The story opens during the 2013 Boston Marathon bombing, a real-life domestic terrorist attack that happened during the 117th annual race on April 15, 2013. I collected news reports, created a timeline, and watched hours of footage, not just to understand the facts, but to absorb the emotional weight of the moment. My editor also helped me create detailed character sheets to track their arcs as the story grew more complex. One of my main characters, Jack Hunter, is the head of the ATU in Boston. He witnesses the bombing firsthand, alongside his girlfriend Catherine. I had to see that moment through his eyes. That meant reviewing difficult footage, images of victims, smoke, panic, and blood on the streets. There's one powerful photo that really brings the chaos of that day to life. It was taken by Aaron Tang and is shared under a Creative Commons license on Wikipedia. You can see the smoke, the confusion, people rushing to help each other. It captures the heartbreak of that moment in a single frame. And here's an excerpt from The Black Widow. As the bombing begins, a loud explosion shredded his daydreams. Startled, he let her go and looked around. A second explosion followed. Instinctively, he let himself drop to the ground and pulled her with him. He went on top of her to protect her with his body against the glass shards and flying debris. He used his hands to protect her face. His gut twisted, and he desired only one thing: keep her safe. Anxious, he looked at her because broken pieces of glass flew around in the air and some of them touched them. He inspected her face. To his relief, he only discovered a few scratches on her. Later on, after Jack returned to the scene, back on the street, Jack saw the havoc the bombs caused. He walked to Boylston Street. People walked across the street, disorientated. To the left, he saw a couple of people running in panic, and to the right, people running towards wounded runners and bystanders. He decided to follow them while his inner voice cursed the terrorists who did this. The blood on the street made him furious. He wished that the offenders were here so that he could release his anger on them. Fucking bastards. He closed his eyes for a second to calm down. Staying angry was no good, he knew. It would cloud his judgment. Jack took a deep breath and listened to the sound of a siren, the cries of people in pain, and the panic. It brought him back to reality, and he looked around to see if he could offer some help. There was plenty to do while he wandered around. His glance went from left to right, and noticed an injured woman lying partly hidden under some debris. A thin layer of smoke circled above the incident. Is she still alive? Worried, he kneeled, pulled off the debris, and checked her neck with his fingers to feel her heartbeat. It was weak, but she was alive. Thank God. What she needs right now is medical attention. He was no doctor, but he knew that he had to inspect her for injuries before lifting her up. When he glanced her foot, that rested in an unnatural angle, covered in blood, he feared for the worst. In a hurry, he untied his tie and wrapped it as tightly as possible around her ankle to stop the bleeding. Something snapped when he lifted her up. It was a weird, sickening sound. Immediately, he looked at her foot. It almost came off. Shit. There was no way to support it. He had his hands full as he carried the poor woman. A cry for help didn't get the attention of bystanders. In the center of chaos, nobody noticed him as he walked forward. Then he thought that he noticed an ambulance through the smoke that circled over the area, ground zero. The thought flashed through his mind. He hurried to it while he glimpsed her. She was still unconscious. Perhaps it is better that way. He relaxed a little. It was indeed an ambulance. 2 medics were nearby, trying to reanimate someone. One of them looked annoyed at him and relaxed a little. Apparently, he noticed the woman in Jack's arms. He gestured to his partner and stood up. Jack followed him closely while he took a stretcher from the ambulance. Together, they put her down onto the stretcher. The paramedic sighed, "Shit, what a mess," and glanced at Jack. Why do people things like this? He wondered out loud. I don't know. I wish I knew. The paramedic sighed again, and then he carefully opened the eyes of the woman. She will be fine over a while. He nodded and glanced at Jack. Can you give me a hand? We need to put her in the ambulance. Jack nodded, and together they laid her in the ambulance where he noticed another bombing victim, lying on a stretcher, and he swallowed a lump in the back of his throat because this man lost both his legs. Jack shook his head in disgust. The offenders who'd done this need to bring to justice. Angry, he balled his fists. Then the medic gestured Jack to get out unless he wanted to ride along. Quickly, he explained that he had only tried to offer some help. The medic thanked him briefly, and then the ambulance drove off with the sirens blaring towards the nearest hospital. From a distance, he saw people pushing a wheelchair, carrying a wounded man. Involuntarily, it reminded him of the days he served as a soldier in Iraq. He hardly survived an attack of a suicide bomber. What happened here in Boston reminded him of that terrible day. I wrote that scene by stepping into Jack's shoes. I imagined the fear, the pain, the urgency, and the anger. That's how a scene comes alive, even the horrific ones. So if there's one takeaway from this episode, it's this. Know your character. Know their world. Do the research. You owe it to your story and your readers.